Will you guys pray with me? Creator God, we ask that you be in this space with us today, that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you. Amen. Inspired by the Appalachian poet George Ella Lyon, Jan Richardson writes her own Where I'm From poem. This poem is used in lots of high school English classes for students to reflect on where they're from. Jan Richardson writes, I am from women less quiet, women of the shout and of the stomp, testifying wherever they can make their voices heard. I am from Miriam and Mary and Magdalena, and from women unknown and unnamed, women who carry their prayers not in books, but in their blood and in their bones, women who pass down sacred stories from body to body. Women often go unnamed in the Bible. The woman is often how we know that there are any women at all in the Bible. And while we hear man's name after man's name, we hear only a few of the women. Yet, in this story, we find out the name of a prostitute, a foreigner. Her name is Rahab. Two Hebrew men of God, find themselves in Rahab's house, a prostitute's house. Have you ever stopped to wonder how two men on business from God find themselves in the neighborhood of prostitutes, much less in one's house? Yet, here in this story, two men who have the entire fate of God's chosen people resting on their shoulders have found their way to Rahab's house. Rahab's physical location and social location in Jericho is literally at the bottom. In verse 15, we find out that she is within the city wall, and she is low enough to be able to safely lower these men out of her window. Her body is at the lowest point in the margin of her society. Dirt, rats, human waste are probably commonplace in Rahab's neighborhood alleyway, not to mention the folks that line the shadows and unwelcomed guests that might find their way there at night. The bodies of her neighbors are the most vulnerable people in the city. They have the least to lose. And yet the spies find themselves in Rahab's house because I believe Rahab is no ordinary prostitute. No one in the city stumbles into Rahab's house. The spies are not there on accident. They have come to that section of the city to be hidden among those who are unnamed, the ones the government doesn't notice. Dust is not foreign to these men. They have been traveling in the desert for decades. But the sewage and the neglect of personal hygiene leaves these men to seek out another clean body. They find Rahab because Rahab is no ordinary prostitute. I see these men moving their way through the alleyway after entering Jericho and descending into the city wall. I see them coming across the stoop to find a fresh, kind face standing squarely in her doorway. This woman, Rahab, is respected in her community. Rahab refuses to let the circumstances of her life define her. Rahab is a woman of hustle. She gets up every morning and she washes her face, no matter who was there the night before. She knows she is not the cheapest person her guests can stay with, and yet she is alive because her house is clean, the tea is hot, the bed is made, and the doors stay locked. She is alive because trash does not define her body, but is something that just gets taken out on Tuesdays. Her hair is kempt, her face is kind, her hands are clean. She knows what her body is worth. Rahab is no ordinary prostitute. The king's men respect Rahab. They know where to find her, and when they arrive, they do not act like the police do in a neighborhood of prostitutes. They know her as a formidable woman. They respect her. Rahab has a history with these men, and she has built a rapport of power. She answers the door, and her body is the only thing keeping these men from men of God. That same body that has spent countless nights in the company of strangers, the same body that in any Christian community would be shamed for how it works to make a paycheck. Yet because of her body protecting these men and her quick thinking that leads the authorities out of the city and away from the men, she is able to make a demand for the price of her body. And the Hebrew men have no choice but to listen. She secures her safety in the destruction of the city of all that she has known, and she secures the security of her family. She has a promise. She has a future beyond the river. Actress Alex Bornstein, someone, if you guys watch Mrs. Maisel, she's in Mrs. Maisel. She's also in several other things. And her acceptance speech for the Emmys about a month ago, as the outstanding supporting actress in a comedy series, she shared this story about the women that she is from. She said, "My grandmother turned to a guard. She was in line to be shot into a pit. She said, 'What happens if I step out of line?' He said, 'I don't have the heart to shoot you, but somebody will.' And she stepped out of line. And for that, I am here. And for that, my children are here. So step out of line, ladies. Step out of line." Rahab stands among the women that we are from, the women who take a risk. Rahab is no ordinary prostitute. Her body tells us her story, and we have no choice but to listen. Rahab's body is the same body that will bring an offspring to save all of humanity. In Matthew 1, we hear the lineage of Christ, and in that, Rahab is named. Through Rahab, we live out the story of a foreigner, of triumph, of female ingenuity, of quick thinking, a tale of a woman born into a poor and broken family who is brave and courageous and uses her smarts to step out of line and step into a doorway. Not through Rahab, but with Rahab, we make it to the story of the body on a cross. That body that gives us the courage to be like Rahab and to become the body that stands in the doorway before the king's government, the European colonists, the Nazis, ICE, and tell them, "You cannot find what you are looking for here." A foreigner, a prostitute. I wonder if Rahab could even fathom the legacy of her life, the ancestral line that she would be a part of, the Where I'm From poem that begins with Matthew's telling of the birth of Christ. Mary, did you know? Rahab, did you know? Mary knew the power of her body. Her body was able to knit together a man that would save humanity. Mary knew that her body was not only a vessel, but a catalyst for the redemption of the world. When Rahab stepped into that doorway, I think she knew there was no going back. She waited expectantly and prepared for when those men would return. I do think Rahab knew this. I think she knew the good news. I think she knew the good news about the redemption of the body that was coming. Today, on Christ the King Sunday, we are reminded that through Christ's sacrifices, our bodies and our lives are redeemed. When Christ our King came, he did not sit at the tables with kings and dignitaries. He entered the homes at the bottom of the city wall, with tax collectors, sinners, the poor, the lame. That is who Christ spent his time with. His followers were no strangers to dirt. They were often fishermen, stinky, smelly, right off the beaches and walking in sandals for days on end. One of his closest companions and family members is John the Baptist, someone who doesn't shower a lot. And yet, We hear John the Baptist and Christ reunited at the Jordan River, the same river that Rahab has to cross over to get to the promised land. Christ does not pass over this river anymore. He gets right into it. Not through that river, but in that river, we participate in the baptism of Christ, the redemption of our bodies. We have hope beyond that river, just like Rahab. One decision to step out of line and stand up for what is right unfolds like a promise of prosperity just beyond that river. The last few summers, I've spent my time on the Navajo Nation. This is a place that has become like my second home. Every Thursday night, we would do this thing with our youth volunteers. We would go to Canyon de Chelly. Canyon de Chelly has a history somewhat like Jericho. Invaders who believed the land was promised to them by God drove Navajo people off that sacred land in that canyon. General Kit Carson and his army drove thousands of Dene people off their land and marched them over 400 miles to Fort Sumner and Bosco Redondo, where they stayed in tent camps. That canyon contains the bones of many who have died along that walk. And at night, it is said that those spirits, those bones, cry out. The Dene people who live in that canyon are a testament to the resilience of the Dene as one of the only places on earth that has been continuously inhabited for over 5,000 years. Being an advocate, deepening your faith, putting not only your body but your spirit between the oppressor and the oppressed is and will always be tiring work. At the top of that canyon, with our feet planted on sacred ground, we sang a song and we listened to the stories of sacredness that have been passed from body to body. I want to share with you this song, and I want you guys to take a minute, and if you feel so inclined, to close your eyes and let this song be a gift as we enter into this season of Advent, as we wait for the birth of Christ. Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain? Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let